cannot believe that I have been here for 10 days.
You gotta be home for my parents. If you're not, it's the second time they'll miss you. They'll take it personal.
Honey, I know I'm gonna be there, okay?
Oh, shit.
What? What is that?
Okay, I'm sorry. I gotta call you back. Girl!
No more iPad! Mom! I was only watching the Great British Baking Show. Now she's going through my history. It's my iPad!
They just have a hard time with you being away for so long.
Well, yeah, I do too.
So, is there an end date?
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm here with the very talented Lisa Molinaro. She has a wonderful film called Incoming Call, and I'm so grateful that you're here with us today. And if we'll get into it, how are you? What's your world been like after making this film?
I'm good. The weather today is it's been like yo-yo weather, so it's really like it was just pouring like 5 minutes ago. So that's always like a damper with the up down, up down. But things are good. The film has done well. We've been at multiple festivals, and we're kind of winding down the festival run at this point in time. I've got to start figuring out about the online release, which I haven't really done a lot of research into, but that's, I guess, the next step. And now it's just about like I've got a bunch of small scripts, and it's like, okay, now I'm really itching to make another one.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I love this film for a plethora of reasons. The performances, the cinematography, the story, I think, is like a quiet bomb. It's just so cerebral and intense. Is it like autobiographical, like in any way, or where did it come from, do you think?
Well, I mean, I have kids, so from a certain extent, it is autobiographical. I think it was just it was sort of like, shall we say, born out of like a fever dream of when I was in this very, I wish we could have shot at the hotel which inspired it. We were in this very bizarre hotel in the off season. It was a hotel that was had an indoor water park and
Wow.
was next to an amusement park, like sort of in the middle of nowhere. And the room, well, it was a huge suite, but it was very dark. So it was like when I first walked into the room, it was really kind of like you got this feeling like somebody was there, but they weren't. Because there was just like beds everywhere, it was like these bunk beds, and it was made to look like it was sort of like a Western theme. So the bunk beds were like plastic, but it was like plastic that was supposed to look like wood. And and there was nobody there because it was the off season. So it was just very sort of creepy, but everywhere you went, there was like these symbols of like fun, have fun. There was like an arcade, and you hear the sounds from the arcade, like from my room. And it sort of felt like being, in a ghost town where I was just by myself in this hotel. And there was all of these remnants of fun, 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 but there was no fun to be had.
I think Stephen King is the owner of this hotel, right?
Exactly. It felt very much like, sort of like that. So it sort of almost felt like a horror movie. So it kind of originated from just the surreal experience of being away from my family, working and being in this really isolated hotel where there was this overall feeling of like sort of creepiness, even though it was like fun vacation, that was really where the idea was born. And I didn't know that anybody else would find it interesting, but I just remember I was working and I was talking to like my boss the next day about this phone conversation that I'd had with my daughter, the night before. And she was kind of laughing and going, so you're away and you're working and the dad is right there, but they call you and they don't disturb him. They call you even though you're away. And she seemed to relate to it so much. And I started to realize that this was a lot of people's stories and maybe I should try to do something with it because I mean, I'm not trying to say it's women but there's typically sort of a parent that takes on a lot of the responsibility And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You kind of like being the hero parent. The kids really need you there, but at the same time, it can really just be overwhelming. And when you're trying to work or trying to get something else done, and you've got these phone calls. So I think I was trying to kind of say, we've got to help parents out a little bit here, because I don't know that the situation is entirely tenable with people working and having, work seeming to demand so much from people, like even more. And like now with, the economy the way it is now, I feel like it's going to get even worse. And, work is very demanding, and having a family now is very demanding. I guess people all like to say, oh, my parents had it easier, but I do think that my parents weren't mired in as many permission slips and, bureaucracy and school forms. And there's just a lot of like sort of bureaucracy involved with parenting now that is frustrating when you're away too. And you're like, the kids got to get these forms in by a certain date, and oops, dad forgot to sign them, and they're calling you, but like you're not even there. So I think I was trying to say something along those lines.
Yeah, no, and just, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I felt it because I'm like a caretaker to my parents. So it's like, yeah, it's just like all these demands that modern society places on you. And I was thinking too, like you said, like forms and bureaucracy, but even if there were less then, now you're so connected with the phone all the time that it makes it always in your face and never ending, right?
Hmm.
Like I love when she just walks into the hotel room and just collapses on the bed. You so feel that. It's like a simple gesture, but just, again, beautifully written and beautifully performed. Like you get it. You feel her exhaustion with just like everything. Yeah, that's why, like, really, like a quiet bomb. This movie is just very, very cerebral.
I love that
Yeah.
description of it. I think that's the best description of this film that anybody's given it. I love that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Yeah, no, I really love it. And how did you get the actors involved? I know a little bit about your background, but I think our audience would like to know, how that all came to be. Um,
The film was born from, so I'm a script supervisor, which is a behind the scenes position in filmmaking. And I was one of the script supervisors on the show Succession. So this film was very much born from Succession, while we were kind of closing out the final season of Succession. And it hadn't been announced that it was the final season, but like I think a lot of us kind of figured that it would probably be. And I didn't. This was sort of a piece of Succession history, this film in a way, because I started. One of the writers from Succession, while we were filming a scene, was like, "Have you ever directed?" And I was like, "No, I really should direct. I have this script, by the way." And it was this script. It was the script for Incoming Call. So then once I sort of said it aloud to the writer, it started to develop a life of its own. And other people were talking about it to a certain extent. Like the writers, they're like, we want to support you. We want to be there for you. And the Succession DP, Pat Capone, who's also a very good friend of mine, was like, well, I'm going to shoot it. And, I didn't even ask him. It was like people were volunteering. So, Natalie is one of the actors on Succession. She's somebody that I've always really admired. And when I wrote the part, I wasn't necessarily thinking about her when I wrote it, but if you read it, you just know as soon as you read it that she would be great in this part. So Nicole Payson, my producer from the film, is also an AD on Succession. She and I started talking about it as a viable project together, and that she would produce it. And, I said, well, I was kind of thinking about Natalie. And so once she read it, she was like, oh God, this is Natalie all the way. So let's send it to her. So, we sent it to Natalie. I wasn't expecting, any kind of response right away. And I think within an hour or two, she got back to us and was like, oh, I can't wait to do this. So then it almost became that sort of surreal moment of like, oh, I guess I have to do this now. It was very intimidating, because it was definitely a long time coming. As a script supervisor, you sit next to the director and, you have to interact with the actors. So, you kind of know you're sort of almost a backseat driver in a way, with the director. So it was never a question in my mind, like, can I do this? I didn't really think that, I mean, because first of all, with my experience on set, what you also learn is if you have a good team around you, the team will do the work and the director can kind of just be there and have some input. But a good director, a director will always be supported by a really good team. So that takes a lot of the fear away from the idea of like, oh, wow, I'm directing for the first time. Yeah, I was directing for the first time, but I'd been on set for a long time and I had this amazing, amazing team. So, I mean, with Natalie as my star, Nicole as my producer, with Pat as my DP, my camera operator, Al Pierce, my production designer, Sashka, who just made that room, really look like exactly what I'd pictured when I wrote it. You have all these people in place, and then it's just kind of like you just show up and call action. And the work
Wow.
just magically gets done, I mean, a lot of it's in the script too. If you write something that people find interesting for whatever reason, that definitely helps. So, I appreciated that element that these people all seemed to be interested in the script, found the topic interesting, and they were willing to be, to do it and put their best work out there.
Wow, yeah, no, I love there's a few, like one-liners, I guess you'd say in there. It's not without its comedy, right? About the parent dying at 80, outliving them at 85. He's still going into the city. Yeah, that like, oh, what are you wearing? Like, you weren't expecting that. So no, yeah, exactly. Like make a good script and, quality actors will be drawn to it. But yeah, how long did it take to write initially? Like, so you
Um,
got the idea, like,
I
and
got the idea from that one trip, so I wrote it very quickly. The original script was probably very short, and then it got a little bit longer, as time went on, and and then some things got cut. Originally, it was really kind of a great scene with her on the phone with her boss, and we had to cut it because everybody who read the script was just like, it's just more interesting about the family. We're not so interested in her work.
oh,
But I really loved the scene because it actually told you what she did for a living, which I'm not sure is really all that clear in the film. But also, it's just you see how different she is with her boss than she is with the family. How we have to be so careful, with our boss and sort of hide our emotion, and also how we can be treated at work, and how, just a sort of a level of kind of like quiet condescension that you can get, when you're in that situation to sort of make you feel more helpless, more stuck in this room, more like you're never going to get to go home. So it's like I kind of missed that scene, but not really. It's like if we'd had more time for it. But it didn't really take long to write at all because it's such a short script and it was such a sort of kind of the characters were very well formed in my head. So it's like once the characters are in your head, they write themselves.
right, right. Yeah, no, and I think we did get a bit of that when she's like on the phone and all of a sudden the boss calls and she's like, oh, hi, so like,
Yeah.
yeah, again, a very relatable moment how we have to, society really wants you to like change faces, depending on who you're speaking with. So yeah, it's like we're kind of all acting in some degree, I feel,
Mhm.
at given times. Yeah, no, again, just incredibly well done. The cinematography. So I guess, you felt in really good hands there. Will you be working with Pat again on your next films
Oh
projects
goodness,
or?
I hope so. I mean, this is the longest now, because I haven't seen him for quite some months. And it's like, because we worked together on Succession for years and then we made that film together and then we worked on another project together. So I don't remember the last time I saw him. And I was like, I think this is the longest we've gone without seeing each other since success, since we started on Succession, and he was like, "Oh, wow, you're right." I mean, and it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, it was great, because Pat brings this depth of experience and talent to it, and also just so much dedication. Where he's like, this is your moment, and I just want to do your moment justice. And I have to mention that Joe Ori, who was my gaffer, I've known Joe from like the first job I ever did, so it's been like 20 years since I've known Joe. And Joe works as an electrician behind the scenes in film, and so he and Pat, they hadn't worked together before, but they connected, Joe basically volunteered, said, I want to work on this. And he and Pat talked, and then they came up with a lot of the ideas for the different moods. Because I'd done, whenever you're making a film, everybody makes a pitch deck. So you kind of take stills from other people's films and put them in the pitch deck. Like, oh, well, in a perfect world, I'd love for this scene to look like this. And one of them was from Hitchcock's Vertigo.
Ah,
And, Pat and Joe were like really happy with the lighting. It's the scene where she's on the phone and they're talking about the rash. So it's sort of like there's a green kind of background, and that was kind of, Vertigo inspired, I mean, like, because we were going for these different moods, because it's like the whole story takes place in one room. So it was like, how can we make this visually interesting? And
yeah, yeah.
also, but still realistic. Like, we don't want to go crazy where, suddenly it changes too much. But how do we make this visually interesting and kind of give different moods and different looks depending on the scene? So that's a lot of where that came from. And we did it in a very simple, technical way, with just sort of mounting the lights and connecting them to a computer and then programming the computer to kind of change. So it was really kind of fascinating to watch that too.
Yeah, no, definitely. You hit it like, yeah, I was gonna say it's very moody. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and it really, stretches the mind of like what you can accomplish in one room. I think it's inspiring for people to see that. Like, like often people might think, oh, they want to contain script but I can't do that. You know what I'm saying? But I think you really displayed with how wide of a paintbrush you can paint in in one room, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
part of the challenge. It's like, you do it that way from a production standpoint of trying to keep things as simple as possible and as, low cost as possible. But then you really realize as a filmmaker, wow, this could get really boring really fast. So you have to think of ways to make it interesting. And then at the end of the day, if you like what you end up with, then it's kind of really satisfying, because it's like, we managed to make one person in a room by herself interesting. And
Mm.
that feels very satisfying.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely for the viewer too.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you become a script supervisor?
Oh, I was working behind the scenes in theater, which really didn't pay very well. And, a lot of the skills that you sort of acquire in theater cross over into film. And so I'd read an article about a script supervisor who became a director, because I'd always wanted to direct, like direct theater, direct. And when I was looking at what being a script supervisor involves, I was like, oh, I kind of already do this to a certain extent in theater. Because if you've had any kind of like sort of stage management, kind of company management for like a small theater troupe, that's a lot of what a script supervisor does as well. So, I started thinking about how to become a script supervisor, and I didn't really know how. But, I think it was in Backstage, they had an ad for like a student film was looking for a script supervisor. So I'd never done it before, but there's a book about it. The Red Book, it's an old book from like, the studio system, but it's still like, it's got a wealth of knowledge in it. I think it's just called the Script Supervisor's Handbook or something like that. So I read the book and went into the student film, and really just kind of like one job led to another job. It took a long time. It wasn't like I did one job and then I was immediately working as a script supervisor. It took years until I was actually making a living script supervising, but pretty much each job would lead to another job, would lead to another job. And I never did any other position on set, like, which I sort of regret, except for when I was making Incoming Call, which is kind of exciting to take on a different role, because the industry is very compartmentalized and you can kind of get stuck in your position. So I wish I'd started making films earlier, but at the same time, I have to be happy that I made one at all and hopefully keep that momentum going.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to ask, like you said, you have some other scripts ready. Like, what would you say as a writer director, like, is like kind of your palette? Like, is it mainly like Incoming Call, or are you one of those people that likes to play in different genres, or
I mean, I would
how?
like to play in different genres, but I think in the beginning, while I'm trying to create a real, I mean, and this is just based on advice that somebody told me, is that they're really going to look at your first couple of films to see what you can do. And they can potentially pigeonhole you. So if you make like one of the first films that I had wanted to make, I remember talking about it to the director, it was really kind of weird. And he's like, well, that's great. It sounds really interesting, but understand if you make a sort of offbeat kind of weird film, that's what they're going to think you are. So really think about what you want your first film to be. So I don't know that it has to be that, contained, but I think for me, it's sort of like the human drama, and I wish I was funnier, but to also try to find some comedy in the human drama and tell human stories, that people seem to relate to, even if they're different. I was surprised with Incoming Call how many men kind of related to the script because they had traveled for work as well. And they were kind of laughing at certain points of the script, like, oh, yeah, at the hotel, like, because they'd been through some of these situations, and I was like, yeah, it is about parenting, but it's about a lot of different things, just about being away from home. So it's like I think kind of starting smaller because it's also what the budget dictates. The smaller is usually less expensive, but smaller kind of human stories that can kind of reel people in quickly in a short amount of time and then branch out from there. But I mean, I love everything. It's like I'd love to be a filmmaker that could just do whatever kind of film, just that I was inspired by the script.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, like I like scary movies and thrillers and I mean like, romances, action films. Action films, I think it would be more of like a historical action type film for me, like a Western or or
Well, that
something,
sounds neat.
something set in the Yukon, because I've always been really fascinated by history and things like that. But it's not like I don't like action films or anything like that either. I kind of like everything as long as it's good.
Yeah, right. There's just good art and bad art, right? No,
Yeah.
no types, right? Yeah, yeah. I guess that's important to remember. What, um, what would you say, feeling wise, experience wise, was there anything that kind of like once you were in the director's chair, was there something that surprised you, moved you, or like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, anything like that, like the emotion behind it? Like once you
Um,
were like, here, I've made it, I have this great cast, this great support team. Was
I had a
there?
lot of reservations with the kids. Like they say, for your first time directing, don't work with kids and don't work with animals, and I broke that rule. So I was really worried about the kids going into it. So the first day was kind of like the first day was sort of we had 3 shoot days. The first day was kind of getting my feet wet and kind of, becoming a director. And there was things on the first day that I knew weren't working while we were shooting it and I didn't know how to fix it. So I was kind of panicked with the first day a little bit. We got through the first day, we got through everything, everything was fine. But, the first day was like, I didn't feel entirely confident. And then the second day was the day with the kids, like, with both kids. Like the first day, the older daughter was there for a lot of the first day. Um, but the second day was like a lot of the kids. So I was really nervous going into it with the kids. And we started off, my assistant director, the way that she scheduled it, and I guess she did it on purpose, but she scheduled the first scene that we did with them is a scene where we don't see them. We just hear them on speakerphone and they're arguing on speakerphone. And it was just a great way to start the day. That scene is actually much longer. I wish that we could actually play the whole scene because it's really a very masterful scene on Natalie's part. Because the two girls are just arguing on speakerphone and she's reacting. And it's just this amazing one take in the original cut where she just sits there and reacts to them arguing before she finally is like, I gotta go. My boss is calling, and she just gets off the phone because she can't stand listening to them argue anymore. But it's just this wonderful performance from Natalie, and we were trying to keep the film under 15 minutes. But the kids were having so much fun bickering that it just really opened them up so that when we did the next scene with them, which was the rash, they did really well in that scene because now they were sort of like seasoned pros after getting through this scene where we don't see them, we just hear them and they're fighting and they really had a good time fighting with each other, and like really they just sort of gelled and suddenly you believe they were sisters.
Wow.
So it was really a great moment. And I remember, Pat coming up behind me and like hugging me because I felt like, okay, I'm a director now. And I feel like he felt it too, where he was like, as a longtime friend, he was excited for me and he was so proud in that moment and he could see it too.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What an accomplishment.
Oh, thank you.